Michelle Gines, and I am here with another Let's Connect session, Purpose Publishing. And you know that every time you come on, we are going to have, I'm interviewing somebody. It's somebody dynamic, somebody awesome, these amazing authors all across the country who have had amazing stories to tell, journeys to share. And I want you, and today is no exception. Today is no exception. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you click the button below so that you can subscribe. And if you hit the bell, every time we put out a new video, you will get a notification. So you'll be the first in the know. All right. So it's Let's Connect session. And today I am talking with the one, the only, Mary Cole Watson, who is the incredible author of the book, Wisdom Warriors. So, Mary, welcome to the show. Glad to have you today.
Thank you, Michelle. It is such an honor to be here. I'm so excited.
Oh, we're glad to have you. I'm glad you had time available in your schedule. Mary, I want to make sure that we have as much time as possible to really talk about this. I've been waiting for this interview because of all of the dialogue and things that we have been seeing going on in the last couple of years. I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to be able to share with people who you are and what you're doing and how they can get in contact with you. So, as we get started, you know, it's never, I never want to not give everybody the proper props, if you will. So if you don't mind, Miss Mary, would you mind sharing with folks, tell people who is Mary Cole Watson? Give them a little background about you.
Mary Cole Watson is an educator. I taught for over 35 years. I was a reading director, reading specialist for most of my career, also a track and field coach where we won the state championship. Mary McLeod Bethune Award winner, Teacher of the Year winner when I was teaching an Upward Bound program. I am everything for children because children are our most valuable resource. And it has been my life's goal to do as much as I can to instill happiness in children through love of culture, because throughout my teaching career, too many of my students suffered from severe low self-esteem, and I was well aware of where that came from.
Yeah, Mary, well, I tell you what, I know when I had the honor of being connected with you, I said, this lady has some amazing stories, and all of the things that you just shared, you know, Teacher of the Year, you know, this is your life's goal, is working with children and everything that you can. And so I want to get into some of that today. So Mary, kind of talk a little bit about, you know, we got together around this book that you were putting together called Wisdom Warriors. And I want you to talk a little bit about this beautiful character in the book who kind of has, you know, this young girl, she's amazing. So tell us first how you came up with your character, Skye. Tell us a bit about Skye.
3 years ago, when I was teaching in a charter school, a high school student became very emotional and interrupted one of my lessons and said, "Mrs. Watson, you need to write stories to help kids feel good about themselves, the way you help us feel good about ourselves." And I knew the reason she was so emotional was because she was failing very badly in a program where she was supposed to be making up credit. And I was well aware that she felt that had she been, if she had been given lessons to affirm her culture, that she would have been able to excel at her highest potential. But instead, she was dealing with being several years behind, and she lacked motivation to move forward because she just simply didn't feel like there was anyone beyond my classroom that was giving her what she needed in order for her to graduate. And so a few days later, when I was working at home, just, you know, doing some chores, I had what is called an aha moment. I had always wanted to write a book because as a reading director and reading specialist, that was my ultimate goal. I just wasn't sure what type of book I wanted to write. And I couldn't believe that at that moment, I said to myself, oh my goodness, this girl is telling me precisely the book I'm supposed to write. So I went directly to my computer and I sat down until the rough draft to my first story was completed. Now, Skye came to be because one of my students in that same class, her name was Skye. And I absolutely just fell in love with the name. And I just thought it was so appropriate for this character because the sky is limitless. Mm-hmm. And if you have a love for culture, what you can achieve in life is absolutely limitless. And no one can make you feel inferior because you know the truth and beauty of the magnificence of your culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? I love the name too. And I always thought, and I'm glad that I actually got to ask you where you got the name from, because the thought came to me when you told me that Skye, I was like, there's so much potential there. The sky's the limit.
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect. That is perfect. So talk, let's unpack a little bit, because you said, about with this as it relates to culture.
Yes.
Young people, kids, really being able to, because of their culture, sometimes they've been alienated or isolated, have low self-esteem. And so what did the classroom look like? You being an educator, what was the mix of the students in your classes?
Okay.
And how did you see, as, whether it's a district or in a classroom, students, how did you see that culture was impacting them, in a way that, because they didn't have some additional training or instruction?
Right. Well, throughout my teaching career, I witnessed most of my students, and my classes were approximately 98% African American. Okay. Most of my students had very low self-esteem, and they demonstrated this low self-esteem with behavioral issues in other classes, not my class, calling each other names, underperforming, and making it very clear that they would rather not be African American based on the names that they called each other, the negative names that we call each other because when we're devaluing one another. The B word, the N word, there's so many words that were used. And, the students obviously were not allowed to use those words in my class, but I understood why if a person feels devalued, then they're not going to value themselves, okay? And when they don't value themselves, it comes out in their behavior, in their negative behavior towards school, towards authority. And I was really well aware of where that came from because the seeds were there ever since I was a child. I was discriminated against by teachers. I was always one of a few African-American students, and I was very obedient. I was on the honor roll and merit roll all the time. I won the spelling bee. I received the top score in math in 8th grade, but yet the teachers ignored me. The teachers did not affirm my brightness. The teachers did not ask me why I was depressed. The teachers, it was clear to me that they didn't care about the African-American students because they simply ignored us. My first African-American instructor wasn't until college. And so when I went to college, so I felt devalued my entire, school career. And when I went to college to major in elementary education, to minor, you had to pick a major and a minor. I discovered on the door one day, African-American history, and I'm thinking to myself, African-American history, what is this? So I went in to inquire what it was about and decided to take a course. And it was the best decision I made in my entire life.
Wow.
I fell in love with being African-American, absolutely fell in love. I had the most spectacular professors, most of whom were African-American, and they guided the African-American students, and it just changed my life. And I had a different attitude, not only towards myself, but to what I was, my environment. Nothing would make me feel inferior because I knew the truth. So this is what I want kids to know. As tragic and catastrophic as racism is, if you have knowledge of culture, the magnificence, African Americans have impacted in every single endeavor for the world and this country, in every single endeavor. And so if you know the magnificence of your culture, then no one can make you inferior. You'll just be angry, and it will motivate you to keep fighting for justice, but you will feel valued because your people should be valued.
Yes, yes, yes. You know what? I love that, Mary, because there's so many of us that, in Africa, and I'm referring to African Americans, that for whatever reason, may not have either been in contact with or inspired by someone that they know, that they could see, that they could touch, that could impact their lives in the way that you just experienced. And then it makes sense that you take what you got and then you taking it back to every young person that you can reach, and so that's beautiful. And I love that. So Mary, talk to me a little bit about if there were 3 things that you believe that if every African-American boy and girl, if they knew, if they heard it somewhere, if it was affirmed, if they were affirmed with these 3 things, they could make different strides or different decisions in their own lives, despite what their circumstances and such might be. What would you say are the 3 main things that they've got to know?
Well, first of all, they need to have some understanding of racism, what racism is. Racism is a very radioactive word. People take it as a personal attack, even if it's true. And so with racism, there are 2 types of racism. And we need to put the focus on structural racism because it's woven in the entire fabric of this country. And so very few people are unaffected. And
right.
So we have 2 types of racism. We have unconscious racism and we have conscious racism. With unconscious racism, people tend to believe in what they think rather than the facts. And so people have to become knowledgeable through reading, because you're not supposed to believe what you think, you're supposed to believe in the facts. And then
right.
individuals who are practicing unconscious racism also tend to have a Black friend or 2 that they tend to, with this one friend seems to speak for the entire Black group, which doesn't make any sense. See, individuals, white people are seen as individuals and Black people are usually seen as a group. So that these people with their friends, they tend to think that their friends speak for the entire group of African Americans. And with conscious racism, people who are practicing that's deliberate because they know that they're getting advantages through it. And so they want the status quo to continue. So we first have to acknowledge that there is racism, and don't let people try to say that there isn't and that you should turn the other cheek. What you need to do is become informed about your culture, because that's what will give you joy, love, and peace instead of low self-esteem. And you'll be able to excel at your highest potential. Another thing is, there is this quote by this Greek philosopher that says, "The greatest skill in life is to unlearn what is not true." So if African American young people and African Americans in general were to unlearn what is not true about their culture and what is true about the magnificence of our cultures, we would fall in love with who we are. And if all Americans were to unlearn what is not true and were to learn what is true about our magnificent, phenomenal culture, they would have a deep love and respect for our culture. And finally, James Baldwin, my very favorite African, and I have many favorite African-American writers, but he's my absolute favorite. And there's a quote where he says that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced. And so when we face the truth, that's how we grow. And so as African-American young people, you have to read about your people to be fed this food that will give you the self-esteem that you're worthy of.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love that, Mary. Oh, that is so good. That is so good. So let's talk about Skye and some of the stories that are included in this book. So for those of you who are tuning in and listening in, number one, I want you to know that you can get your copy of Wisdom Warriors by going to the website Wisdom Warriors 2020. And it's just Wisdom Warriors 2020.com. And you can get a copy. Mary, let's talk about some of these stories and what made you pick these stories. So let's give the audience a little premise of what you expect.
Yeah.
So this isn't like one story from beginning and then there's an end. These are multiple stories that are used over time. So I don't want to.
Okay. So I want to first say that there's really two publications in one. In Wisdom Warriors, I have the 28 lessons for African American youth that is included in the last story, Family Reunion. So I want to first talk about that. I created those lessons because I wanted my students to have high self-esteem, and the schools were not celebrating African American history in the way that I felt that they should. So I created these 28 lessons so African American young people could journal about these lessons on their own or talk about these lessons with their peers or family. And these lessons were published in our Cleveland Plain Dealer many years ago. So I was very proud of that. And that's included in the last story. Now, Wisdom Warriors is a collection of 22 short stories for African American children dealing with the challenges of racism. And I wrote the stories because every child is supposed to experience joy, love, and peace on a regular basis. But we know that African American children don't experience that on a regular basis because they're facing a lot of unconscious racism. And so through the eyes of the grandparents, I tell these stories because with African tradition, the elders are supposed to share stories with young people to help them with their difficulties, but also more specifically to help them with the trauma of racism that they will face for their entire life. And so with these stories, there's 22 of them, the grandparents take turns picking up their grandchild, Skye, who they absolutely adore. She's a precocious young lady. She's a confident young lady. They pick her up from school because her parents are working. And when they pick her up, each day they have an adventure together. And through those adventures, Skye always ends up asking them a question about a challenge she faced during the day. And she does this because she absolutely loves talking to her grandparents. She knows that she can ask them anything, and whatever she asks them, she knows they're going to be truthful with her, give her an age-appropriate answer, but yet she's left feeling confident and happy with something that originated as a difficult problem. And so there's stories about, the first one I wrote was on culture. All the topics are very timely. There's one on incarceration. There's one on profiling, police profiling. And through all of these stories, the grandparents, they share this adventure, but they also give her advice. And the advice are a solution to all of the challenges that she's experiencing, so that a lot of the advice that the parents give her, a lot of African American people are not aware of. and certainly most white people are not aware of. And so this information is so affirming to our brilliance as a people. And so it just excites Skye. When she's really unhappy in the first story because her culture is made fun of, her grandparents sit her down and they're talking about the brilliance of the culture, and yet she's still not convinced. But Grandpa says, well, I have an idea, Skye. Why don't I sign up for a speaker day? And I'll come to your school and I'll talk to your class about our beautiful culture. So with that, that made a difference to her, because she knew that the people that really needed to hear this information would hear this information from her grandfather on speaker day. And so it would solve the problem that she had with her other classmates thinking that they were not as important as their white classmates.
Yeah. The stories are exceptional. They are absolutely exceptional, and they're so good. And before we run out of time, I want to make sure that I again tell people where they can go and get a copy of the book. It is wisdomwarriors2020.com. Pick up a copy. These are good for educators. They're good for young people. They're good for parents and grandparents. If you want to have conversations with kids, take a listen in. You get to listen in with Skye and her grandparents, and kind of how they have dialogue with her and some of the situations. I mean, these are things that are probably happening in households all across the country with young African American young people.
May I share some of the things that have happened with the book?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. Mary, tell us a little bit. I wanted people to know where they can get their copy of the book, but I want to hear about some of the things that have been going on since you've been sharing it.
Spectacular. So I was part of a prestigious Black authors event at Loganberry Bookstore in Cleveland, and they asked me to bring 14 to 15 copies of my book. And I sold my book there. I was interviewed on We the People for Juneteenth, and I sold 61 copies at that particular gathering. I Zoomed for the foster care system because there are lots of white foster parents fostering African American children. I've done radio interviews. Let's see. Oh, to me, my greatest success is that my book is in the library. Our library has won many prestigious awards every year. And within 2 weeks of giving the director of the library my book, when I met with her, she said, I love everything about this book. And she put it in the branches, and it's in Cleveland Public Library, the biggest library in Cleveland, and also in another library in Cleveland, the Euclid Public Library. I've done several festivals, and I've done Zoom presentations for middle school that went exceptionally well. So there's been a lot of great stuff happening since this book.
That is amazing, Mary. That is amazing. So again, everybody, I want you to know, one, how to you can get a copy of the book, wisdomwarriors2020.com. That's where you can go to get the book. If you are looking for a speaker, someone to come and share about African-American history, these books, the young girl Skye and these amazing stories, you can reach out to Mary. You can you can get in contact with her via email at colewatson44@gmail.com. You'll see her email right below this interview, along with the website. So you'll be able to just connect with her, because these are amazing stories, and they were so appropriate, especially after some of the things that we saw happening in summer of 2020. Mary, I just applaud you and the work that you have done with Wisdom Warriors. It's amazing. You just needed to get it out. After you get it out, then it just kind of takes off from there. So that is beautiful. So what have you got coming up? I know you told me that you've got a festival
Yes, I have a festival, Tremont Festival. It's one of the largest festivals in Cleveland. That's coming up for me in a couple of weeks. And then a teacher, an elementary school teacher, just contacted me about doing some Zoom lessons for a librarian, got in touch with me and wants me to do some more Zoom lessons for her elementary school class.
That is fantastic. That is fantastic. Well, Mary, I am so glad that you had a chance to come on and visit with me today. I swear it never feels like I have enough time to get everything and to hear everything that's happening. So we'll have to do this again. We'll have to do it again. I'm sure that there will be many that want to reach out and connect with you in so many ways, because there's a lot going on in this, especially in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And a lot of that happen with corporate organizations, but there's a lot that they're wanting to do in schools. And so I just applaud you for this work, these stories. When I first heard them, I thought they were amazing. And I'm glad to see all of the things that you've been able to do since you've been able to share it. So before we get off of here, because I know this is about the third or fourth time I done said that we about to wrap up. I feel like an old Baptist preacher when you say you're gonna close it.
Yes.
But Mary, what's the last thing before we do close? What would be the thing that you want to say people to take away or to get from Wisdom Warriors, from you? What do you want? What word of encouragement do you want to leave with folks?
What I want people to know, most importantly, parents think that children don't think about race. And they absolutely think about race. They think about it. They know differences beginning at age 3, but they also know that they're not supposed to tell their parents what they're feeling, because the messaging from parents seems to be, well, there's not much we can do about it, just take care of your business. But when they say that to a child, what that does is, all it does is erode the self-esteem of that child and lets that parent know that the offender is more important than the child. And this is the most important thing that listeners need to take from my talk. The Society of the Pediatric Society for Infectious Disease said that structural racism is more damaging to the health and well-being of African American children more than any disease, including COVID-19. So for those parents who think that it's not having an effect on their children, they really need to pay attention to their child. Are there behavioral issues? Are they happy? Are they excelling in school? Are they disengaged? If they're not happy, there is always a reason why a child isn't happy, and it's up to the adult to do some investigating.
Oh, that's good, Mary. Mary, we're going to have to come back and just have another conversation about that. We really do have to do this again. We didn't have enough time today. Thank you so much.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yes, you are so welcome. I know listen, I'm just saying this to you. The calendar opens back up in September. I just gave the dates to Vivian, and so she's going to be sending out the dates. So make sure we get back on the schedule again so we can have another conversation, because I think that is so important. If the Society of Pediatric Infectious Disease says that racism is really more hazardous to the health of children than any of the diseases that we keep seeing and hearing about, and including COVID-19.
Exactly.
We really do need to have some conversations and bring some awareness to parents across the nation so that they can begin to do this. Because a lot of times I just think that as parents, unless a child asks or ask them, there's probably a lot of conversation that's not happening. So yeah, we'll come back and do it again. All right, you guys. Mary, it's been a blessing. Okay, so this has been a Let's Connect session. Our guest today was the Mary Cole Watson, author of Wisdom Warriors, and a profound and awesome educator there in Ohio, retired educator now, but she's an author and kind of on the speaker trail now. If you got to get in contact with her, because I just know that her calendar and schedule is going to be filling up, because with the things that she's saying and sharing and the way that she does it is amazing. Remember, check her out online, www.wisdomwarriors2020.com, for those looking for an awesome speaker and guest to have on their shows or podcasts, or to interview in their classrooms around books and education and this awareness about African Americans. Please reach out to her at Cole Watson 44@gmail.com. And of course, you see the information there at the bottom of your screen. Well, this has been a wonderful session. I've enjoyed today. I know that you have too. Don't forget, if you have not subscribed to our channel, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. And if you hit the bell below, anytime we release a new video, you will be the first to be notified. Mary, it has been a pleasure, my dear. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. You've been wonderful.
Thank you. All right, friends and family, until the next time, thank you. And we'll see you soon. God bless.